So welcome back guys. Here in this particular session we'll be talking about the housing and the ventilation, right? So basically, we all are having a dream of having our dream house, isn't it? So here you can see, we all are having a at least dream of having one, fancy or dream house basically. So we are going to talk about that. What are the parameters which we need to keep in mind as far as our house is concerned, right? What are the basic parameters from the government side that we should be following, right? So we'll be talking about that particular parameters, right? So at the same time, very important for the exam point of view, so we need to look into this, right? Okay, so with that guys, let's start with the housing and the ventilation. First of all, I will be taking the ventilation, and then we'll go to the housing part, right? Okay, so here let's begin with the ventilation guys, right? Now, what is ventilation? Ventilation, we know that, in the house, we very commonly we're talking about the ventilation, right? While we are building our houses, right? We are actually telling the engineer, the civil engineer, that we need to take care about the ventilation. What about the ventilation? How you will be managing the ventilation and all of those things in our home, and all of these things we are generally very commonly asking them, right? So basically, it is ventilation. It makes sure that there is a balance of the air which is coming in and out from your air, right? From your home basically. So it involves the quality to control over the incoming air and the outgoing air. Basically, if I talk about incoming or outgoing, then basically it is involving the incoming of the air, not the outgoing over here. So what is the ventilation? Ventilation, it is involving the quality control of the incoming air. So it involves quality control of incoming air guys. Okay, so that is also your MCQ, that it is whether it is involving the outgoing air or not. So technically it is not involving the outgoing air, it is taking care of the basically incoming air, right? Now then, if we talk about the ventilation, right, it is basically involving the replacement of the air which is present inside the room, right? For an example, that could be the vitiated air. Vitiated air means that it might be having the low level of oxygen in it, right? So what the ventilation will be doing over here, it will be actually pouring the fresh air inside the room, so that vitiated air which was having the low amount of oxygen, it will be replaced with the high amount of oxygen air, right? So basically it involves the replacement of vitiated air. Vitiated air, what is this vitiated air? Means it is having the low amount of oxygen inside it, right? So it will be involves replacement of vitiated air by the fresh outdoor air, right? By the fresh outdoor air. So it will be coming inside your particular room, right? Okay, so it will be also taking care of the comfortness of your room, comfortness of your home. So obviously when you will be having the fresh air inside your room, you will be feeling more comfortable over here. So it is actually aiming to provide the comfortable thermal environment. So it provides comfortable thermal environment, right? Okay, now what are the number of air changes? That has also been asked. What are the number of air changes that should be there in a drawing room or in your living room? And second question is, what is the number of air changes in the work hall or the assemblies, right? So guys, question over here, right? Question comes, let's say, number of air changes in drawing room or living room. Yeah, that might be funny to you, but over here, that these are the questions. So one question is this one. Second question is number of air changes. So I'm just writing like this: number of air changes in workplace or assemblies. Okay, over here if they're asking you, then different answers can be there. For an example, 2 to 3 per hour, 2 to 3 air changes per hour should be there in the drawing room or the living room. And if you talk about the workplace or assemblies, it might be 4 to 6 per hour, right? So that is the thing which we are talking about in the ventilation. So 2 to 3 air changes per hour will be seen. 2 to 3 air changes per hour will be seen if we are talking about the living room or the drawing room, and might be 4 to 6 per hour at the same time if we are talking about any kind of workplace or workstation or the assemblies, right? Okay. Now, if we talk about the ventilation, guys, broadly we can say that we are having two types, right? Broadly we are saying that we are having two types. On one side we can say that we are having the natural method of ventilation. On the other side we might be saying that there could be the mechanical methods as well, right? If we talk about the natural method, there are some subcategories which we shall talk about over here, and same with the mechanical also. So let's talk about the natural method. First one I am taking over here, that is the perflation. Okay, perflation. Now perflation means simply, we are actually allowing the wind to blow through it. I mean, if you are opening the windows or you are opening the doors, sometimes, in the summer season you are opening the windows and you are opening the doors and all of these things, and let the air blow through it, right? That is a perflation, right? So if you are allowing the wind to blow through some kind of space, right, it might be window, it might be door, something like that, so that is called as the perflation. Example over here I shall write. So what could be the example in these cases, right? So I'm writing the example, that is opening windows or doors. Second one which we shall talk about, first is perflation, second one is the aspiration. So what is aspiration? I know aspiration, different kind of terminology is coming in your mind, that if the food content is going into the trachea and now the person is actually aspirating, right? That is the thing, but I'm not talking about that thing over here. Aspiration, I'm talking about the ventilation part, right? So aspiration, actually, if the wind is actually blowing through some kind of obstruction, right? Let's say there is a window, and before the window you have just put the curtain. Now the air is blowing through that, right? So there is an obstruction, obviously. So over here we are talking about the aspiration, right? So wind is actually blowing through obstruction, right? So here we are talking about wind blowing through obstruction. Okay, however detail will not be asked, but here I am just writing for your convenience purpose so that you can understand what I am talking about. Next one which we shall talk about over here, that is the diffusion, right? Yes, so it's kind of a very familiar term with you if we talk about the diffusion, because in the diffusion we are talking about, usually we are talking about the food diffusion, the food fragrance of the food diffusion, or the fragrance of the any kind of perfume diffusion, right? But this is again the ventilation part diffusion. Here we are talking about if the wind is actually blowing through some narrow space or some slow passage, right? So for an example, there is some cavity, or there is some hole somewhere or other, and through that if the wind is passing through, right, sometimes it is causing some kind of echo also when the wind is actually blowing through that particular area. So basically the idea is that if the wind is actually blowing through the small passage, then it will be called as the diffusion process, right? And it is also coming in the natural method of the ventilation, right? So wind blows through small passage, right? Wind blowing through small passage over here, and sometimes it can create the echo sound with small passage, right? And the last method which we shall talk about, everybody knows that there is a cross ventilation. Cross ventilation means there are the windows just opposite to each other. So from one window the air is coming inside, from another window air is going outside, right? This is the cross ventilation only. So wind blows through the opposite openings. So on one side you have opened the balcony, and from other side you have opened the door over there. So cross ventilation is happening like that, right? Sometimes you are doing that, obviously, right? And you feel better. So at last, ventilation, what is ventilation? It is increasing, enhancing your thermal comfort as well. So that is the thing over here. So cross ventilation we shall talk about over here, that it is the wind passes through or wind blows through opposite openings, right? So that is your cross ventilation. Now we shall move on to the mechanical methods of the ventilation. In the mechanical method we shall first of all talk about exhaust, right? We shall talk about the exhaust over here, the exhaust ventilation. I know you are thinking about the kitchen right now, because usually you are seeing that exhaust on the top, just below the roof there is an exhaust over there inside the kitchen. Usually whenever your mom is preparing the food or you are preparing the food, you will be usually turn it on, and then what is the purpose? air is coming from outside to inside, or air is coming from outside, air is going from inside to outside? You know that better, right? So exhaust, if you are switching it on, then obviously the air which is present inside, because you are making the food over here, it has to go outside, right? So that fresh air will be coming inside. So this is the purpose of using the exhaust. So in the exhaust we are saying that the air will be going from inside to outside, right? Air will be going from inside to outside, no doubt about that, right? If I will use the term just opposite to it, there is another term. Just opposite to it, there is a term that is called as the plenum. In the plenum, we are talking about just opposite thing. Here, the air is coming from outside to the inside, right? So, if the air is coming from outside to inside, then it is called as the plenum. Okay, so please be very clear with that. I know you will remember the exhaust. Just remember that opposite to the exhaust, there is a plenum, and this is the mechanical method of ventilation. Another one we shall talk about over here, that is the balanced ventilation, guys. That is the balanced ventilation. In the balanced ventilation, we are talking about the combination of both, that is exhaust and the plenum, right? So it's very simple. So it's a combination of both, that is the exhaust plus plenum. Okay, if you will be combining both of them, then it will become the balanced ventilation. And then at last, all of you might be using it, that is the air conditioner or air conditioning. In the air conditioning, obviously we are talking about so many things. It is actually taking care of air temperature, it is talking about the humidity, it is talking about the air movement, it is talking about the cooling power of the air inside the room, right? It is talking about many parameters over there. So it is basically, in a nutshell, I shall write over here that it is controlling, or it controls the temperature, it controls the humidity, it controls the air movement inside the room, right? So these kind of factors, air movement, with that many other things, but these are the basic ideas, right? So this was this was a difference between the natural and the mechanical methods. Very commonly they are asking you that which of the following is not a natural method of ventilation. This kind of question might be asked. So you just remember natural and the mechanical methods, and that question might be coming. Details will not be asked, but these types at least they will be asking you, right? Okay, now we shall move on to the housing part, right? Now let's talk about the housing, right? Now let's talk about our dream house, right? Okay, we are talking about the dream job, we are talking about the dream house and all of these things. So let's talk about the housing over here, right? So what are the social goals of the housing, right? Question comes, first question from this particular part, that what are the social goals of housing, right? So what goals we are talking about? If we are talking about the social goals over here, right? So here we are saying that person should be having the shelter, right? The person should be having the access to community facilities, access to community facilities. It talks about the family life. It talks about the economic stability, and it also talks about the family population in community life. Family population in community life. Okay, so once they had asked you one question from this one, that which of the following is not the social goal of housing, right? So you should be knowing these social goals over here. So shelter, access to community facilities, family population in the community life, family life, and the economic stability, right? So these are the social goals of the housing. Next question comes, that what are the housing parameters? So this is the most important part of the discussion in the housing category, that housing parameters, right? And generally, while making the rule, while making the house for us, while making the home for us, right, we should be keeping these rules in our mind. And whenever the civil engineer is looking forward to make the house, okay, these are the parameters which he or she will be keeping in his or her mind, right, while structuring the house. Okay, so first parameter over here which we shall talk about, that is the site. Okay, that is the site. Site means that is very, very important. So in the urban areas and the rural areas, there are different criteria. So on a general basis, we are saying that from the road level it should be upward, right? Your home should be actually upward, so that you're not talking, so that many of the disease also you are preventing from the road to your house, right? and many of the microorganisms can be prevented. Second thing over here is, we are talking about that your house actually should be at least 15 meter away from the road if you are talking about the urban facilities, and it should be 25 meter away from the cattle in the rural areas. So over here I said that if you are talking about site, basically your house actually should be 15 meter away from the road. 15 meter away from the road, more than 15 meter away from the road in the urban areas obviously, and in the rural areas we are saying that it should be more than 25 meter away from the cattle. Okay, in the rural areas. Okay, second point which we shall take over here, this is about the site. Second point is, what about the wall of your houses? What about the wall of your houses? Wall should be at least 9 inches thick and it should be strong wall. So wall should be strong and it should be at least 9 inches in thickness. Right. Okay. Third point over here, other than wall, we shall talk about the floor. Right. If we talk about the floor, basically it should be a pakka floor, right? And easy to clean basically, and it should be free from the cracks and all, right? So all of these things we should be keeping in our mind. Basically, the people will be keeping it in mind. So floor should be pakka floor. Then only we will be saying that it is a pakka house. So pakka floor and easily cleanable, right? And it should be free from cracks. Etc. Right. Okay, fourth point over here which we shall discuss, we have talked about the floor over here, right? Fourth point is the floor area. What about the floor area? Yes, from the floor area very commonly they are asking us the questions. What about the floor and the floor area? In the floor area we are talking about that this much floor area should be there at least for one person, and for 2 and 3 person, how much area you are talking about? So basically they are saying that less than 70 square feet, right? If they are talking about, then they are saying about 1 person, right? 1 person. Now you will be adding just 40 to that, right? It will become for 2 person. If you will be adding another 40, then it will become for 3 person. So for example, less than 110 square feet, right? Less than 110 square feet, then it will be for 2 person. Then less than 150, then you can say 190, right? So it will become for 2, 3 and 4 persons respectively. So 2, then here 3, then here 4, right? Okay, so 70 square feet for the 1 person, then 110 for the 2 person, like that you will be keep on adding the 40 number to it. Okay, then we shall talk about the next parameter, that is the roof. So how the roof should be there. Okay, now for the roof we should be keeping the distance in the mind, that if you are talking about the roof, basically height should be at least more than 10 feet, right? So if we talk about the roof, basically the height of the roof from the floor, it should be more than at least 10 feet. Okay, it should be more than 10 feet or should be more than 3 meter. Okay, but nowadays we are seeing that there is a lot of construction going on for the flat purpose and all, and there the height actually, because they want to build more and more buildings over there, so height is actually somewhere or other gets compromised, and they're just making height of 7 feet or 8 feet like that. So less than 8 feet is actually illegal only, but ideally it should be at least more than 10 feet. And in ancient times, in the old times, if you will be visiting the palaces, if you will be visiting the forts and all, right, in the Jaipur or in the Agra or something like that, then you will be seeing that, you'll be noticing that the height of the roofs are so much, right? Why is it so? Because basically they wanted to maintain the ventilation part, right? So that is very important. So for the ventilation part also, the roof height is very important. Next parameter is the rooms. Okay, next parameter is the rooms over here. Okay, so after this, just check your house. Okay, how many parameters are getting ticked over here? Okay, so that can be interesting to learn over these parameters, right? Okay, now rooms over here, at least basic number is 2. Basically at least 2 rooms should be there. Now it depends on the family members and how many family members are there. According to them, rooms should be present over there in the room. right? So basically, if you talk about the room, at least 2 rooms should be there, at least 2 rooms. So basic number is actually 2, at least 2 rooms should be there. Okay, rest it depends on the family members. Okay, so if the family members will be more, then obviously the number of the rooms will be more, right? Next is the cubic space. So recently cubic space, question came from the cubic space, that how much cubic space is actually needed for one person over here, for an example. So here we shall write that 500 to 1000 cubic feet, 500 to 1000 cubic feet air space per capita. Okay, that is needed for the person if you talk about the cubic space in a particular house, right? Then if you talk about next parameter, that will be your, this was the 7th one. After the cubic space, we shall talk about the windows, right? Windows and the doors. About the windows, it should be 1/5 of floor area. Same applies for the doors as well, 1/5 of the floor area. And windows, actually they should not be more than 3 feet above the ground. If they will become 3 feet above the ground, more than 3 feet above the ground, then they or less than them also, because if you will be just placing the window just 1 feet above the ground, then obviously it is not a window, it is kind of it is working like a ventilation only, right? So window should be having some height over here, and they are saying not more than 3 feet above the ground, right? Second thing is, at least one room should be having 2 windows. So one room should be having 2 windows, so that we are properly maintaining the ventilation in the rooms as well. So they are saying that at least 2 windows should be there for one room, 2 windows per room. And second point is, not more than 3 feet above the ground. So windows height of the windows should not be more than 3 feet, right? 3 feet above the ground, right? What about the doors? Doors should be also covering the 1/5 of the floor area. Okay, right. What about the lighting? Okay, next factor, lighting in your room, lighting in your house, right? Very fascinating thing, especially in the Diwali time and all, right? So what about the lighting? Basically, lighting is actually measured by one particular term over here, which we need to remember, that is the daylight factor. Okay, we shall talk about the daylight factor in some moments, but for now just remember that we are talking about the lighting. If we are talking about lighting, then we shall talk about the daylight factor, which is also abbreviated as DF. Very shortly we will be talking about that. Okay, so DF, actually if you talk about, it should be more than 1% over half of the floor areas, right? So it should be more than 1% over half of the floor area, right? So that is about the lighting. Next point we shall discuss over here, that is the sanitary part, right? Obviously you should be taking care of about the sanitation measures, because many communicable disease also and non-communicable disease also, they might be spreading if the sanitation will not be taken care of. So every house, it must be having the sanitary facility, right? Every house must have the sanitary facility, right? Okay, so that is about the sanitary facility, right? Now we shall talk about the water source. If you talk about the water source, that will be the next point over here. Okay, so water source, obviously it should not be very far from the house. From any house, it should not be very far, isn't it? So actually, it should not be, right? Actually, it should not be present more than 100 meter of distance or 30-minute walk, right? Should not be more than 30 minutes walk or 100 meters away. Okay, so it should be there only, so that the people living in the house, okay, they should not be traveling for such a basic necessity, that is water, right? Now a very important question comes, guys, from this particular topic, that is overcrowding, right? That is overcrowding, right? So what is overcrowding basically? Okay, overcrowding means that obviously that if more people are living in one room only, that causes the overcrowding, right? In a hostel, usually what happens, right? When the students are living in a flat, for an example, what happens usually? Overcrowding is very common, isn't it? So what are the criteria for the overcrowding, guys? Overcrowding will be saying that if there are more than 2 persons in a room of opposite gender, yes, male and female, right? So that is the thing over here. But there is an exception. It should not be husband or wife, because obviously husband and wife, they are living together only. But if it is not husband and wife, and it is they are having the opposite gender, one male and one female, one boy or one girl, right, one uncle or one auntie, or whatever it is. So one male or one female, if they will be living together in a room, that will be considered as the overcrowding, one of the criteria of overcrowding, right? Second criteria we are talking about, if they are living together, sleeping in the same room, that will be considered as the overcrowding. Now question, they are asking you that, these much members are present over there, and how many rooms will be sufficient for these members, right? That can be the question. So guys, let's talk about the very important term, that is the overcrowding. So what is the criteria for the overcrowding, guys? It will be considered to as overcrowding if there are 2 persons of opposite gender, right? So writing over here, 2 persons of opposite gender living in one room, or sleeping in one room, right? Sleeping in one room, then it will be considered as overcrowding. And exception is husband and wife. If they are husband and wife, then it will not be considered as the overcrowding, right? Okay, here the important term is opposite sex, guys, opposite gender. Okay, so please be very careful with that. One more point over here I would like to mention, that in the overcrowding, this thing I will talk about later on. Okay, so don't worry about that. But over here, if we talk about the overcrowding, opposite gender, male and female living together in a single room, that will be considered as the overcrowding. Here the important question comes, which I was talking about, the number of persons and the area which they are needing basically, and the number of rooms. So number of rooms are required for number of persons. However, it is easy only, but still we should be clear cut about this particular thing. Many times they are asking us. So number of rooms, if we talk about, it can be one room, 2, 3, 4, 5, isn't it? So for one room, they are saying that 2 persons maximum, right? For 2 rooms, they are saying 3 persons. And if I'm saying 2 persons, it could be husband and wife, right? Okay, if any other will be there, then it will be considered as the overcrowding. Now 3 rooms, if we talk about, then it will be 5 persons, right? 5 persons. If it is 4 room, then it is 7 persons, and if it is 5 rooms, then it will be the 10 persons, right? So basically what you need to do, just double up the number. 1 room, 2 persons, 2 room, 4 persons. Now here you need to decrease 1, right? Just double of the 3, that will be 6, minus 1 become 5. Just double of the 4, it is 8, minus 1, it is 7, right? So these kind of things you need to do basically for calculating this one, right? Okay. Now sometimes they're asking us, so direct question might be coming from this particular table, number of rooms, number of person. Now they're asking you floor space standards. They're asking us floor space standards. So here also, guys, direct question comes sometimes. Here they will be asking you that what area will be required for this much persons, right? For an example, I'm writing that here on this side I'm writing the area, here on this side I am talking about the number of persons, right? Number of persons. Now they are saying that how much area is required for at least 1 person, right? Okay, so less than, I told you already that 1 room is required for the 2 persons. Here I am saying the square feet, I am saying the area. Area is always in the square only, right? So centimeter into centimeter, meter into meter. Okay, that is a meter square or centimeter square. Usually we are measuring the area like that only, that is the unit of that. So basically we are saying that if it is 110 square feet, if it is 110 square feet, or I am just writing 110 feet square or 110 square feet, then we are saying it is adequate for the 2 persons. It is adequate for 2 people or 2 persons, right? If we are saying that if it is 90 to 100 square feet or 70 to 90 square feet, or 50 to 70 square feet, then what will be your answer in those cases? If I am saying 90 to 100 square feet, then one person and one child is adequate for this much space. So one person plus one child, and one child can be considered as the half person also, and one child, I am taking the age of less than 10 years. If it is less than 10 years, then that child will be considered as the half person. Basically, child will be considered, can be considered as the half person also. So 1.5% or 1% and a half person, that can also be coming in the exam like that. So you should not be confusing yourself, right? If it is 70 to 9 feet square, that is good for the one person over there. Okay, so for one person, at least he will be needing this much space, right? Usually what we are seeing, just adding the 40 number to the square feet, and it is becoming for that, like 70, let's say 70 square feet a person is needing at least 70 to 90 for one person, then you will be adding 40 to it. Okay, for example 70 plus 40 to become 110, so that is suitable for 2%. Just add again 40 to that, that will be suitable for 3%. Like that we are doing, right? You shall just remember the figure of 70, that is for one person, and then you just keep on adding the 40 40 40, and you will be getting the area for the persons accordingly, right? And if you talk about the 50 to 70, half person or one child, as I told you earlier, half person or one child, right? It can also be considered as half person. Okay, just writing so that you don't forget as well, right? Okay, now few things which we need to understand over here, right? Few things which we need to understand over here. Please note that, for the rural housing in India, right, there was a scheme launched by the government of India in around 1985, and the name of this scheme was the Indra Awas Yojana. It has already been asked, guys, so that's why I am telling you. So here Indra Awas Yojana, because at that point of time Indira Gandhi was the Prime Minister. So Indra Awas Yojana, it was actually launched in 1985 from the government of India side. For what? For the rural housing in the India, right? To address rural housing in India. Okay, so rural housing in India. So that can be your historical MCQ. Next one more important fact over here, I'm just gonna tell you over here, that might be your MCQ, that now this same scheme is actually called as the Pradhan Mantri Gramin Awas Yojana. Pradhan Mantri Gramin Awas Yojana. I just wrote Pradhan Mantri as PM. Pradhan Mantri Gramin Awas Yojana, which was actually launched in 2015 for the same purpose, right? It has just been renamed. Next point which I shall make over here, that is, PM Awas Yojana was launched for the urban areas also, and the purpose was the same, that it was actually beginning to provide the houses for the urban people, poor people in the urban cities, right? So Yojana for providing the houses in urban areas to poor people. Okay, so this Yojana came into picture, that was the PM Awas Yojana Urban, right? Because it was taking care of the urban people, that's it. Okay, that's why they named it as that one, right? And they are having a theme that housing for all by 2022, right? They called this scheme as housing by 2022. Okay, housing for all by 2022. That by 2022 they want that everybody should be having house. So housing for all by 2022, right? That was the scheme, PM Awas Yojana, right? So first of all, in 1985 Indra Awas Yojana came, then it was renamed by the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, Pradhan Mantri Gramin Awas Yojana for the rural areas, and Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana for the urban areas, right? Okay, so over here they called one thing that was housing for all by 2022, and that might be your question as well. And here this is the this is the logo for the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana. Okay, and this logo is looking something like this. Okay, so there is a home behind that, the sun is there, right? So this kind of image you should remember. So this is the PM Awas Yojana, Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, right? So that was about the housing and the ventilation, guys. In the next section we'll be talking about some points about the light, sound and the radiation, right? Thank you.